Here to discuss is Senator Eric Schmitt of the great state of Missouri. Welcome to the show, Senator Schmitt. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be with you. Congratulations on the show, by the way.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So what was your reaction to the week of "It Can Now Be Said"?
I mean, it's so phony because, right, it's safe to say it now because they were peddling these lies with the hopes that President Trump wouldn't get back in office. I mean, whether it was the censorship regime or all the lies that they peddled, whether it was about COVID or the grift and the corruption that was happening in Ukraine or the immigration issues that people were raising, sounding the alarm, 20 million people here illegally, their response was nothing to see here. It was like Baghdad Bob, right? Remember the Baghdad Bob character? That was the legacy media. And now they're sort of like, you know, dribbling out some of this truth that we've known for a very long time. But the American people are smart. They saw all this in front of their own eyes. They sat in their own jury box in 2024, and that's what this whole thing was about, was a return to common sense. That's what President Trump is delivering, and it still drives the left crazy, which is why you see them, you know, firebombing Teslas, assaulting ICE officers. They don't actually believe in borders. They don't actually believe in the sovereignty of our country, and they're much more comfortable in a weird way of funding, you know, a war on, you know, another continent away to defend the sovereignty of that border than defending our own. And that's why vast swaths of middle America, so-called flyover country that I represent, sort of loathe the elite, and they're looking down on them for having this point of view.
So speaking of that war, it was reported this week that there are contours for a new plan in which Ukraine would join the EU in 2027. There would be United States security guarantees. There would be a demilitarized zone along the border. And of course, something we've all known all along, there will be land swaps as an inescapable part of the deal. Senator, what can you tell us about the status of this deal?
Well, I mean, they're still in the negotiation phase, and thank God President Trump is actually committed to this process, right? I mean, for the years previous, when under the Biden administration, in both parties, but mostly the Democrats, it was just sort of a blank check for an endless war. And, you know, I would tell people in my conference and otherwise in Washington, there's literally nobody in Missouri that's ever come up to me and said, you know what, Eric Schmitt, we need another $60 billion for Ukraine. They see our roads crumbling. They see our bridges crumbling, right? It's just not. Now, it's not to say that there aren't issues that are important as relates to foreign policy, but finally we have a realist in the Oval Office that sees the world as it is, understands what our core national interests are, the homeland in our hemisphere, and the rise of China, right? Europe needs to step up in a much more meaningful way for the defense of their own continent. In many ways, they've been taking the generosity of Americans for far too long and subsidizing their social welfare programs in their countries, right? And it's unfair to the American taxpayers. And what you're seeing, I think, is a reset now. When the Cold War ended, there was never really an adjustment. You know, everyone was united to defeat Soviet communism, get Europe and Japan back on their feet. So we had this sort of situation that needs to be addressed. Europe needs to contribute more for their own defense. And it's also playing out on trade policy, right? In that you had these terrible trade deals across the globe that took advantage of Americans to prop up these countries. And that time has passed, right? That time has passed. And so the people that I represent, they got the double whammy of this globalist agenda, which was their jobs were sent overseas. You know, their wages were undercut when they were looking for new jobs by way of illegal immigrants. Those white-collar jobs now are feeling the same pressure from some abuses with the H-1B program. So there's a lot to take on here. President Trump's doing it, and I think resetting this worldview, and it's a long time coming.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.